Good evening. Welcome to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and it is such a joy to be here with you this evening. If you loved watching the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, well, we have a whole competition tonight that we're going to be talking about. But this one is in the form of Bard versus Bing. Google's Bard versus Microsoft's Bing. Artificial intelligence has been flooding the news lately with the battle between ChatGPT, which is basically created a whole stir in the search engine technology space. Google announced the launch of the chatbot Bard, and Microsoft's OpenAI phenomenon ChatGPT has really turned all of these chat engines and this whole phenomenon into a tailspin. But what does it really mean to us, the end user? Well, if you're a student, or if you're a reporter or a speaker or an author, or anyone who really does research, it can really be very helpful. Or can it? I did a very interesting experiment tonight, and I put into ChatGPT what's the difference between ChatGPT and Google's Bard. And it came up with a completely different answer than Google did. As a matter of fact, the one on ChatGPT was completely inaccurate. It changed Bard to Bart or Bert. And that's not what I was looking for at all, even though I typed in Bard. But on Google, came up with an accurate answer. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. It's going to be a fascinating conversation with my guest, Brian Sathianathan. And he started his career at Apple, where he was initially hired for his software development and encryption skills. And after 6 years there, he has had an incredible career in technology, and he's going to come and talk with us about the pros, the cons. If you haven't heard about ChatGPT yet, you will. And tonight we're going to break it down for you. So we will get that started right after the break here at Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and joining me to talk about the AI conversation is Brian Sathianathan. He started his career at Apple, where he was initially hired for his software development and encryption skills. And then after 6 years, he went through a series of various software platforms. And now he is the co-founder and chief technology and digital officer of Iterate AI, which I was attracted to because they have a very interesting software about a threat awareness technology that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Welcome to the show, Brian. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Lisa. Great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being on, and I appreciate your expertise. I am not the tech host. I am a host, but not a tech host. But I'm very interested, and I've done a lot of research and been fascinated. I have ChatGPT myself, and I use it for various things. But let's just start off by talking a little bit about what does AI do? How does it work?
AI is a broad umbrella, right? It includes many different things. So typically, when people hear the word AI, the first thing they think of it is Terminator, right? But AI is far more interesting and far more segmented than that. So let me give you some examples, right? So today, if you go to Amazon and start shopping, you actually see AI that's recommending, right? So all the recommendation and then the products that you would like and things that you would pick, all that information is basically going through a deep neural network, and it's making the recommendations for you.
Based on your prior searches and interests.
Prior searches, things you like, and then also like stuff that you've done on other websites. All the data is collected about you, and then the machine learning systems are trying to make a prediction on what you would be liking, right, and what you would buy, and also things that you've added into the cart at a given time. So that's just a very simple explanation of how AI can be used in your daily life. But then in things like, if you are on a website and you want to communicate with a chatbot, that's again, an AI ML application. Then if you're driving your vehicle and you want to, pump gas, your license plate may get recognized. Or if you're crossing a toll booth, your license plate gets recognized. That's another AI application using computer vision. And lately, the interesting topic of ChatGPT, Bard, and all these different systems that are out there, which are called large language models, which can help generate content, right? Not only can they actually answer human queries, but essentially they are generating content from prior learning. So that's another application of AI systems. So AI is vast, and they have different applications at different places, right? All the way from recommendations to all the way to robotics. So it's a wide field, and all of them are developing at the same time simultaneously, which is why it's very exciting.
Well, it's interesting because the first lecture I ever saw on ChatGPT, I couldn't understand what the guy was saying. Chat what? And what does GPT stand for? And so he took us through how to download this on our phones, and it was, of course, free, open software, and it's something that Microsoft invested maybe $10 billion into this OpenAI company, which is not much in the terms of investments, but it was kind of it's still in a beta phase, and it sources the internet of prior to 2021, vast amount of information that is taken from the internet, like 175 billion pieces of information or something like that. And then it gives you an article or a chat, basically, on the question that you're asking it, as opposed to a Google search where you type in couches and you get all these websites on couches, or whatever you're typing in of UFOs, you get all these websites on UFOs. And then that gives you have to comb through and source through the different material on Google, and you don't know what to trust, and you have to look at the source of the advertisement, and et cetera, et cetera. As opposed to ChatGPT, it sources all of it prior to 2021, and it gives you their summation of the information that it sources from that 175 billion bits or something like that. Did I give that a pretty clear, Jeff?
That's correct.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct, yeah.
So how does that change the way that we live? Why is this such a big deal?
Great question, Lisa. But I think it's not just only about ChatGPT. Just like AI is vast, the application of people asking the computer a question, right? At what we call nowadays as a prompt, and the computer giving us back answers in an intelligent manner, either as a textual response, just like ChatGPT, or it could even be a video response, or it could actually be a game that could be created, right? All these things are possible because the machine knows enough data today. It has enough information about the past that it has the ability to generate all these things much more with a higher degree of accuracy. Right? And the reason why this can be big is because depending on the verticals and the industries, right? This is sort of the number of applications are vast, right? I'll give you a really interesting data point. I think in the 90s, when the personal computer revolution was happening, they asked Apple Steve Jobs, then CEO and founder, the question like, what do you think the personal computing can do for the humankind? His explanation was the personal computer is sort of a bicycle for the human brain. Nowadays, we are in the generative AI world, right? In this deep learning world, things like ChatGPT, as well as technologies in the generative space, are sort of like what I call a supercar for the brain, right? It's not replacing human beings. It's actually giving humans thousands of combinations of things to do. For instance, we even for our own website, prior to ChatGPT, our writers, we have few PR folks and teams, marketing teams, they would write the articles, and of course we would get probably 3 or 4 articles built a month. Now, within the last 6 weeks, we were able to produce 200 articles. And of course, we added a lot of human touch to it, and humans rewrote part of it. But we were able to see the combinations. Imagine a film director, before shooting a scene, he could visualize hundreds of combinations of how the scene could be shot, right? Or a writer, before writing his core chapter, could visualize 20 different combinations of writings based on the prompt he provides. So it gives humans the ability to see, because what computers have always done is when the amount of data is a lot, it's very hard for humans to calculate through that data and crunch through that data. And that's why we used calculators, and that's why we used computers, right, for processing a lot of information. Essentially, what ChatGPT is doing is taking that to another level, where, when you have a world of human existence of, I don't know, like, literacy existence of maybe 5,000 years or 3,000 years. And can you actually look at all the data? Of course, ChatGPT is a short amount of time, but there's a lot of data on the internet. And if you can go back and if you can start looking at all that, there is a lot of knowledge that even a very intelligent human being can't process all that stuff. If with tools like this, it's sort of a supercar for your brain. It's giving you combinations, and you could put your creative spirit on top of it and create something very unique.
Well,
it's the starting base point.
You said something very interesting, though. The basic platform here is we are learning to chat with our computers.
That's right.
We're learning to talk with them and have them talk back to us and become friends with us and think like we think. And no matter what we do, that's the underlying basis of this. And it becomes much like Facebook. Is it a friend or is it a foe? Is it a time sucker? Is it a way for you to really truly connect with people? There are two sides to everything. Forget the job losses and all that. We can cover that in a little bit. But what about the idea of, do we want to talk to our computers or do we want to talk to human beings? And I did read that now the dating sites have adopted this technology, and you can literally say to one of these sites, I'd like this person with this type and this interest, and it'll just show you the profiles of all of these people without having to spend thousands of dollars on the dating sites themselves. So it's usurping a lot of different technology out there, but how much is it allowing us to go down the rabbit hole and forget about interpersonal communication?
I agree with you. I think that's definitely a problem, but I think it's much as much as it's a technology problem, but it's also a human problem as well. What I mean is, earlier, in a pre-technology world, humans were forced to make that communication because of the need was there. So today it's abstracting ourselves from one another, right? Separating us. I mean, even social networks that are meant to connect humans are actually, in fact, separating them.
Disconnecting them.
Well, absolutely not connecting them, but rather separating them. At the same time, also this concept of the rabbit holes, right? Because most of these systems are designed, most of the social systems are designed to have high degree of engagement, because engagement is a big metric that these companies measure. Because of that original goals, a lot of human effort and time is spent on sending people along the rabbit hole so they would spend more time in areas and topics that they are interested in, which in a large grand scheme of things, it's not beneficial to the human society, right? But that's, I think, where, as humans, as technology comes to the market, for the first couple of years is always chaotic, right? And even ChatGPT, it probably would create more chaos than value it adds in the short term. But as time progresses, people will see its benefit, and then, things either the humans get used to it or the technology adapts itself to be more beneficial to human beings, right?
Yes.
So those are the kind of the evolution that happens, and I think generative AI is also going to go through a very similar transformation and evolution.
It is here to stay. I mean, I've heard that technology that we've seen develop over the last 10 years, we will see that same speed in the next 10 months. And this could be one of the reasons why it is accelerating so fast, is because there's so many. I mean, I'd love to know why this was created in the first place, because I do see the point here where you get a high degree of engagement. You're learning to talk to your computer and then sell, buy. I mean, there's so many implications to something like this. What was the original reason why this was even created?
See, I think it was created due to a number of reasons, because what happens is, if you look at the AI revolution, right, from 2010 to Because AI has a lot of times when you say AI or machine learning, you always have folks say, well, I did that in my PhD in 1972 or 1985, right? So AI has been there for a long time. But what happened is in the 2008, 2010 time frame, two major things happened. One is the GPUs, the use of GPUs to use them to process artificial intelligence, because they were originally used for gaming. Moving them to process more and more artificial intelligence became mainstream. So that means we could do more computations. The other is the algorithms, how these deep learning networks learned, got better. There was a technology called backpropagation, which was sort of invented during that time or applied at scale at that time. So what happened was we were in a place where we were using statistics in the early era. Then we had this concept of deep learning, which is basically using computers, just like the way the human brain would process. You have something called a neural network. So you have basically neural technology built into the machine's memory cells, and then you would train the network. The beauty of this is all you had to do was to have a series of inputs and a series of outputs, and the machines would learn automatically. So this era of deep learning was there from 2010 to 2016, 17. But then still, even with deep learning, the ability to understand human language, like chatbots were, if you look at chatbots in pre-ChatGPT time, they were still a joke. People never took them seriously, right? Mm-hmm. Now, with ChatGPT was an aha moment, right? That's because the earlier deep neural networks couldn't do this type of learning. So over time, companies focused on training what you called large language models. So what made large language models possible was this technology mechanism called a transformer. Think of it like an algorithm, right? It was able to learn language more smoothly. And because they had the ability to do that, companies made investments saying, what if we take all of our knowledge, all the language, everything we have, not just earlier, typically, if you look at a neural network, it's trained with, let's say, like a couple of thousand parameters or inputs. In these large language models, they are giving billions, 500 billion inputs, right? And of course, these things takes hundreds of millions of dollars to build and train because it requires memory and compute. So we are right now in the third era. The first era was sort of the machine learning era. The second era is the deep learning era using neural network. Now the third era is called the LLMs, the large language model era, where we are building large language models where we can understand human language, process them, and make meaning out of them in a much more effective way.
Okay, so then it's making meaning out of language and how that's the basis for so many different things. I mean, I've heard this being the whole idea of this type of language learning model being similar to the creation of the combustion engine and how quickly that accelerated the automobile industry. But then if you look prior to that, you saw the creation of the electric vehicle get started and then quickly get crushed by the combustion engine industry. And could this be something similar? Could this be something that's created that has the potential to overtake so many different industries that it could actually get crushed by a competing industry? I wonder.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's, of course, always possible in technology, right? Because it could always take a turn, an unexpected turn. But what's really interesting, though, is that what I really like about the current use of artificial intelligence and technologies like ChatGPT is that they are across industries. So it can be applied in many, many industries, all the way from marketing and writing and creating content to customer service to basically writing books and shooting movies to making music to much more creative spectrum, right? From mundane business to a very highly sophisticated creative spectrum. Mm-hmm. It could be applied across all that stuff.
Even the end user of shopping. And by the way, where is Amazon in all of this?
Amazon also has contributed to models like this in the past. So I think a lot of companies are definitely working on this type of technologies. And the other is also what's interesting is, Lisa, like a application of OpenAI is available. The API is available commercially, right? Even though ChatGPT itself isn't available, but the core engine behind a lot of these things are available. So companies are, I'm sure, integrating and testing and building their own versions over time. I'm sure there is a lot of innovation going on in all this.
At the same time. Well, you have a lot to talk about with your company, Iterate AI, and this threat awareness technology, which I think is fascinating. We'll be right back. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and what it means to us. And we haven't spoken much. My guest, by the way, is the wonderful Brian Sathianathan, and his company is called Iterate AI. And he's actually put artificial intelligence to a very interesting use through this development of threat awareness technology. Let's talk about what that is and what kind of technology that is.
Perfect, Lisa. So my company, Iterate.ai, we build a technology that basically enables the development of AI much more easier. Think of it like Lego drag and drop. So that's how the original company got started in terms of building technologies for larger companies, so they could do things like license plate recognition to do commerce, or things like recommendations on a retail website or a conversational commerce chatbot. But over time, we saw that there is a lot of public shootings and various forms of threats taking place everywhere in schools and in public places. And we thought, how can we use our technology to help in this case? And that's how we ended up building the threat detection technology. Our threat detection technology is essentially, think of it like today, like most schools. If you take a public school, for instance, has 30 to 50 cameras installed in it. The cameras will capture data all the time. But then there are humans who have to monitor all this data, right? But that becomes extremely costly. And, of course, it's harder for humans to catch things that happen rather quickly. What we've done is we've used artificial intelligence to sit in the back rooms of these schools or public places, and then it'll take the camera, the video feed that comes from the cameras, and then it'll use that AI to identify things like knives, the presence of Kevlar vests, pixels, rifles, or any form of automatic weapons, right? And even robbery masks and theft masks and so on. And by doing this, we've trained our system over thousands of different data points. And if it's very certain that there is this is an active attack is taking place, it'll use the alert system that's built into the school, and it'll notify people, right? So we have this system currently working in a few schools.
That's great. So how effective has it been in the schools, and how do you tell the difference between a right to carry and someone who's actually got an AK-47?
Great question, Lisa. So one of the things that we have to initially in the early stages when we started, working with schools with this, we have to handle was this case where staff have right to carry, right? So we have to actually build mechanisms to train out staff or well-known people who are security guards who are employees of the school or contractors who are carrying. Versus people who are not identified by the system, and also the threats that it generates or the notification it generates are sort of like multi-layered. So depending on the severity of it, it would generate a different type of a notification, right? So in that way, the school staff or the administrators or the public place administrators or the network security centers, which are monitoring these things, have the ability to distinguish between how they want to act.
Okay, that's interesting. So you would have to, it would have to know the difference between a security guard, or if there's certain states that have a right to carry, if they have certain rules that need to be adhered to. I'm sure that that could be figured out. But what about in large stadium type of environments where there could be mass shootings or concerts or music festivals or airports? How can people learn, or how would this technology learn the difference between a threat in a large scale like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we are still working on doing this, deploying this technology at a very large scale environment. But I think currently what we are exploring is the ability to put this technology on door entryways and where there is, inbound and outbound of traffic. In those areas where there is a narrow, entryways, where we can monitor much more carefully because of the nature of the traffic flows, right? So that's how we are trying it first. We also are partnering with another company that provides a specialized radar hardware that can actually detect weapons inside backpacks and various, concealed weapons, because they have trained those models as well. So in conjunction with such hardware, our system can work more efficiently, because whatever is seen by the naked eye can be captured by our artificial intelligence, and things that are not seen can be captured by a radar-type system.
So how does this affect people's privacy?
So that's a great question. So what happens today, though, is that a lot of the capture that we do not identify the person. So we do not actually know this is Lisa.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the first thing, because several states do have, video laws for video consent laws, right? So because of that, we do not detect human faces. We blur out before any detection happens. So in that way, we are able to capture privacy. The other is a lot of this information is not sent to the cloud unless an actual significant threat is detected. So it's not stored in a cloud so that there are other privacy regulations and criterias, right, are not violated, because now a lot of times people are afraid that this information will leave the premises. We provide computer systems or work with the local schools or the public places to run this technology, so it's all the information is contained within.
I mean, I can understand if it's a private company, but you've mentioned a couple of times about this license plate recognition. That would be a breach of privacy because your license plate is directly linked to your identity.
Correct, absolutely. So license plate recognition is only run in private places, right, or premises that are owned by businesses. Because today, if say for example you enter a gas station to pump gas, or if you enter into a QSR, a quick service restaurant, to order burgers in the drive-through, at that point you can capture their license plate because that's property owned by the business and you are entering the property. So scenarios like that, we are able to capture license plate. Of course, everything we do is with the permission of the
company,
of the companies that have installed these systems.
So if, for example, I go to Starbucks and it captures my license plate every time I go to Starbucks, how does that impact me then? Do I start to receive ads, discounts for Starbucks on my phone?
Couple of things that can happen, right? From a convenience angle, when you enter your drive-through, they will know it's Lisa, and then they will know all your prior purchases and the type of latte or the mocha you drink, and then you don't even need to tell the person in the drive-through what you want unless you want to change your order, right? You can just simply say the usual, and then there you have your coffee. So a lot of convenience in terms of ordering and picking up, right? Imagine stores like Safeway, because at our home every Sunday night we have a Safeway order, but we already have created the list, so it's just a matter of copying the list and changing things we want. So with technologies like this, next time when you go, they know that you are here, and they'll just load it into your vehicle.
Right.
So that creates the convenience aspect of it, right? But there are of course, with that, companies would also do marketing, but there are already well-established regulations and law, right, in terms of CAN Spam Act and, getting your permission to see if they can send you a text messages or not.
Right.
So if you opt in, you will get. If you don't opt in, or you can, if you have already opted in and you don't want these messages, you can easily opt out.
I do know that that's starting to get clamped down, which is great in terms of the text messaging, and new laws have been passed that you have to opt into the messages now. And you'll see the double opt-ins between the email and the mobile verifications and so forth. And that's good. But how do you tell the difference between all of the spam that is out there? It is infiltrating, and I'm sure every time you send out a new type of software, you've got 19 different types of spam softwares that come right along with it that look just like it. It's very difficult to tell the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another challenge with the propagation of technology, and then how people are consumers are as more and more consumers become technology savvy, and it becomes a part of their life. There is the idea. There is a lot of spam. Not only spam, there is also security and phishing, right? Hackers and various folks would want to pretend like the business and want to take information out. So that's definitely a challenge. But I think a lot of the phone manufacturers, like Apple and Google and others, are making their phones more secure, and putting more and more privacy tool sets. And over time, I think there will be better and better filtering tools. Right? It's always like when something new comes, there is everybody gets into it, including the bad guys. But eventually things get stabilized, and that's what we are going through.
I'm sure we're going to see that along ChatGPT's lines. And
absolutely.
Yes. And what do you think the future of that? I know that there's a big, firestorm right now, Bing versus Bard, and how that all is going to come down. I know that there's some type of launches that are coming up this week that are not privy to the public. They're private. But how do you feel that's all going to shake out?
That's a great question, Lisa. I think it's hard to tell in a general sense, but I think I have some guesses. I think what's going to happen, I think, is this type of language models are going to get better and better and better. They are going to include more natural sense of communication in terms of you could generate articles much more accurately. There's going to be more and more statistics. Bigger data sets are going to get involved, right? Like ChatGPT, for instance, is not very current, right? It's until 21. And I think some stats are not included in it by design to kind of make it sort of timeless. So things like that eventually are going to become better and better from a text generation perspective. But I think this same phenomena of this idea of giving something into a computer prompt, and the computer could generate any type of either music or video. I think that type of industry is gonna become bigger and big, right? It's like do you remember in 2012 or 2013 they would say when you talk to a startup company they would say we are Uber for X, or we are Uber for Y,
yes,
right? Or we are Twitter for X, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we are DoorDash for Y. So similar kind of concepts is gonna arise. So lots and lots of startup companies are also going to start jumping into this bandwagon. In fact, you already see this here in Silicon Valley. There's gonna be ChatGPT for all kinds of verticals, right? We are content generation for manufacturing. We are content generation for whatever. And I think the more exciting stuff is it's not just only generating articles. It's also going to be generation of video, right? Imagine I want DALL-E and Stable Fusion, where you can go and say generate me an image of somebody of the 1969 moon landing being captured in Hollywood, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it would. In fact, there are articles on that, right? It's really amazing the type of image it generates.
Right. And you could do reels on it. It'll add the music for you. You could say, okay,
absolutely.
upload these pictures, edit it together, and put in mood music, and it'll do it all for you, and you can upload a reel.
Absolutely, right? And it could even generate synthetic actors, right? So today,
Animated?
If you have a movie star like a Tom Cruise, he has rights. So not only for his pictures, but also derivative content made with his images, face on it, right? But tomorrow there could be synthetic actors where various companies could generate and own, and they would have rights, right? So we are getting into a really interesting world where all these things are scaling, right? Imagine today if you are starting a startup company, you have to have an HR department, a finance department, an R&D department,
a legal department. Because,
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you think about that, people are going to have to start to copyright their identities.
Absolutely.
Think about that. You have to, I have to trademark Lisa so that nobody uses it to create another show or whatever they want to create. Like George would have to trademark George. So someone doesn't go off and create a coast to coast with the simulated George on AI technology. How do we stop this?
I think what's going to happen is even those automated copywriting and verification, all that stuff is also going to become automated too. So instead of you going through a whole trademark office and sending an application and going through a manual process of uploading an app and paying the money, it's all going to become you turn on your thing, go to a website, the camera turns on, and then you upload a bunch of your ID and take a picture of your face, and it's probably going to be in the blockchain eventually, and a lot of that stuff the copywriting process is also going to become automated.
Wow. I mean, you just eliminated about 3 industries: the trademark industry, the copywriting industry, and the video technology industry. You just wiped those 3 out with that sentence.
No, I know, but I think it could also be that the owners of the industry or the regulators of the industry will still be the same. It's just that the interface for them with the consumers is going to be completely different.
So you really have to follow this in order to find out how to pivot.
That's right. You have to follow and change faster, right? I mean, look at digital, right? This whole if you are a senior leader, say you are a senior leader hired in 1999. Your only biggest problem in a bigger company is how do I get my business to the internet, right? If you are a senior leader hired in 2010, your problem would be how do I get my business to mobile device? How do I get an iPhone app or an Android app? If you hired in 2016, you have to think about how do I get AI, how do I get IoT, how do I get blockchain, how do I get data, everything. Today, if you're a leader, you have to think, how do I get generative capabilities into my business? So transformation is a very large opportunity. At the same time, it's also a challenge. If companies don't move fast, they can be disrupted and they can be out of business very quickly.
It is. I mean, it's accelerated. All right, we're going to take another quick break. I thank you so much. This is fabulous. We're going to take calls soon. And we will be back with my guest, Brian from Iterate AI. And I'm Lisa Gar. You're listening to Coast to Coast
Welcome
AM.
back to
Coast to Coast AM. We have been speaking with Brian Sathianathan. I'm so sorry. Sathianathan, right? Did I pronounce it correctly? Thank you. From iterate.ai. And we're talking recently, just before the break, about certain different types of pros and cons of AI technology. And I was just speaking with Michael over here, our engineer, talking about Bruce Willis, who actually sold his rights as an AI actor. And that is something that he basically was one of the first Hollywood stars to create a digital twin of himself to be created for use on screen. And this is this an example of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an example of the evolution of AI, right? I mean, this is where every human being can have multiple versions of themselves, and I think it's good that Bruce Willis recognized that early on, because I think the idea of every one of us, there could be a digital twin of Lisa, there's a digital twin of Brian, right? And all these digital twins, with the help of generative AI and content, can actually be on their own and participate in the digital world, right? So I think it's definitely a good move.
It's interesting because it says, because he had experiences with, he had retired as an actor, and in order to have his digital twin created by this particular company, he didn't sell the rights to himself, but he did allow this company to create the digital twin, maintaining his own rights for himself. So this is kind of the future of what we're going to be doing. I mean, it's very interesting. So I just we're going to go to callers shortly because there's a lot of curious questions coming up about this topic. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right, let's go to Mark in San Antonio. He's one of our first-time callers in Texas. Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Do you have a question for Brian?
Yes. I have a question. I'd just like to ask, after reviewing the stuff online for a while, do people in your industry ever ask whether they should do something before they do it, or do they just plunge in?
Oh, you mean in technology?
Yeah. I mean, you've destroyed writing, you've destroyed music, you've destroyed video production, and now you're talking about I've got to get a digital copyright on my own self, which I didn't have to do before, and, somebody could forge that, and, with AI. And I see a whole lot of problems coming up that don't need to be there.
The ethics of it all.
There, if we could keep AI in, within certain limits and do the things it does best, like sorting through huge databases looking for patterns.
Right, and security.
Not use it for creating art. Do not use it for creativity. Keep it where it belongs and nowhere else.
Well, that's a good question about the ethics of AI. Brian, do you have
I think
around
Mark's onto a very interesting point, right? I think this is definitely something that there is a lot of people, even in the tech industries, companies who are putting out these models themselves are actually in discussion with, right? Because I think as we evolve as humans, as we go through this evolution, we have to think very carefully about how AI is used. I think it's a two-edged sword, right? Because one side of it is that you want to restrict AI to the point where there is ethical use, and of course there is non-ethical. There is significant restrictions on non-ethical use of AI. So that's one area. The other is you also don't want to restrict AI to the point where it becomes it curbs the innovation, right? So there has to be a fine balance. And in fact, I don't know if you looked at, Mark, that recently White House had a proposal on the use of ethical AI. Right? They were trying to put out to various industries. So there's a lot of different initiatives happening from many different places, all the way from the industry to the government to also researchers. I mean, if you follow Clubhouse channels on AI, you will see a lot of technology leaders who are deeply involved in this come out and say that they are concerned about the ethical use of it. So it's a great question, and I think there's a lot of effort that's already it's already in place and then taking place as we speak.
Well, I do think it's fascinating because it's not going away. It's only going to get more pervasive in our lives. And what if we continue to raise the ethical question, then maybe it will continue to be considered, because I get what Mark's saying. It's just like, do you think before you do this type of stuff? Because the implications are going to change things. But of course, so did the electric car. And this is what technology does, is it turns things on its head, and you have to adapt and adjust. It's better to be informed and to decide how you want to approach it. And I'm not saying anybody needs to go get a digital license on themselves. I highly don't suggest that. Let's go to Joey in Los Angeles. Joey, hi. Do you have a question for Brian?
Hi, Lisa and Brian. Yeah, I was wondering what the legalities are going to be in the future, because now celebrities do sue people for name and likeness. Like Bette Midler sued someone using her someone was imitating her in a commercial, her sound of her voice, and she sued them and she won, and they stopped the commercial, and like Kylie Minogue sued Kylie Jenner and won the right to use Kylie as the name. So Kylie Jenner cannot just use, she has to attach her last name to Kylie. Kylie is owned by Kylie Minogue.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. So are you saying, do we need to protect our own likeness will the laws change around that? Could be.
Will it be more, like, what do you think they're going to do? Is it going to be more complicated or?
Will that automate as well, Brian?
Yeah.
See, I think that's another good question, because what happens is, since this is all just beginning to unfold, right? We with ChatGPT are only seeing textual content creation, but soon we'll end up seeing video content creation. And for the last 1 or 2 years, we've had synthetic content, right? You could create an actor who looks like somebody else and say things that actor did not say. So this whole idea about as this slowly moves into mainstream entertainment, there has to be a pretty big revival of copyright laws, and there has to be significant addition on derivative content creation rights, right? What type of derivative content can be created from it? So that's all going to happen very quickly. Given the fact how quickly these things are changing, there's probably going to be a period of chaos, because technology always evolves faster and much at an exponential speed than what laws can come about. So there's of course there'll be a period of chaos and gaps. But I think as things change, things will smooth out, because I think organizations as well as these private companies and the governments and even people like yourself are realizing that if this is not regulated well, or the right set of guidelines are not provided, this could kind of go out of whack. So definitely that need is there, and I think things are going to get better.
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, I guarantee nobody at Google watched the Super Bowl this weekend because they've been under this, what is it, the red alert or something for high alert for their programmers. Definitely a lot of change happening fast. And you can even see in the Google search engine, if you just search something, it gives you a paragraph first now, rather than just website. It gives you a description first. So they've adapted quickly and over the last few days to looking a little bit more like a chatbot than a search engine. I think this is what we're going to see going forward. Let's go to Neil in California, west of the Rockies. Neil, thanks for calling in. Do you have a question for Brian?
Yes, I'm wondering if Brian knows how politicians can be kept from making fake videos. Like
you were just talking about, right? Where they take the image of another politician, like you could get Trump and Biden saying that they love each other so much. That would be funny. Can you stop that from happening where it does come from to like slander and so forth? Of course, I go to the opposite. I go to the love side. But can you stop that from happening?
There has been research in that. I think there are a couple of tools that are already available today. There are a couple of startups who provide separate tool sets. Yes, there is significant research in this area, right? How do you actually detect, distinguish between synthetic and real characters, right? Synthetic AI-generated content versus a real human content. Same thing is also happening today. Like even in ChatGPT, they themselves provided a tool set, right, to detect if this content has been generated via a ChatGPT, right? Similar type of things are going to keep coming out, as this technology unfolds in the next coming weeks and months. You will see more and more tool sets coming out.
Yeah, I think it's one of the ways to use it, if you want to use this in a smart way. If you're going to look up something on ChatGPT, ask it to look it up with resources. So you can look up the resources and fact check them on your own to see if half of what is being displayed to you is true or not. I think a good question is coming in from Charles in Sebastopol. back here in California. Charles, do you have a comment or a question for Brian?
Yeah, a couple of them, actually. Just for fun, I was actually a participant in the Virtual Humans Conference in '97, and these are the exact issues that we were talking about then, legal parameters, sovereignty, all that sort of thing. But two things I wanted to squirt out if I can. First of all, I tend to see evolution favoring the most adaptive, not the fittest, but the most adaptive. And that's exactly what we're pricing. We're looking at an evolutionary event horizon of sorts. Those who can adapt will probably do incredibly well.
We are.
There will be a lot of other folks, though, that have no idea what to do, and they'll be lost. And I'm sorry for that. But as your guest correctly pointed out, this is disruption. Evolution is always going to be disruptive. So is new tech. You mix the two together, and you have a truly disruptive realm. And that's how you sort this future out. But the other thing is the layer of employment that I see most targeted soon will be mid-level management. Having spent a lot of time in corporate realms, over the decades, there were a lot of people who, to put it bluntly, were paid huge salaries, but they didn't really do much. They were sort of like a liaison between different development groups. They did a lot of paper shuffling and developing charts and everything. But in fact, one thing I can say is that because of COVID, a lot of companies discovered there was a lot of people they didn't need as they were starting to filter out people from their home offices. I think what's happening is the whole process of AI becoming what it is has been somewhat accelerated by the COVID situation.
It's interesting because it would favor the entrepreneur if you think about it. When you get into
a lot of people who can actually use the AI tools to further their process, whether it's a student in school or somebody launching a new business or any other kind of realm that has yet to be developed. I see AI as a tool, not as a threat. This also reminds me of in 1890s, there was a huge revolt going on in England on the docks. People were swearing, this is horrible, it's going to be the end of humanity, etc. You know what that was? A forklift.
Yes. We've seen many of these in our time where this disruption, the level of disruption is met with a counterattack. Of course, it threatens people's security. It threatens in many ways survival. And we saw this at the beginning of social media where people were onboarding and some just absolutely refused to use it. And it's not going away.
It's not. I actually just wrote an article that it got published a couple of weeks ago where I used AI to write an article about AI.
Very good.
So anyway, I see this come around the corner. I just wondered if your guest had some thoughts about this, especially about the evolutionary part.
Absolutely. I think that it's a good observation. On the first comment you made on regarding the evolutionary part and also the whole idea about survival. See, I think that the survival is going to happen at two places, two areas, right? One is consumers as individuals, just like every one of us, right? Today, we need to catch up on skills and also be ready to adapt these technologies and be adaptable and go through the evolution as human beings. The other is also the challenges corporations. Companies have to, in the previous segment that I was explaining, that companies have to now adapt themselves faster, because if they don't adapt faster, they themselves will be disrupted very quickly. In fact, the threat to companies and corporations by this type of technologies, I would say, is higher than any given individual in terms of the expectation and the speed of adoption. That's the first comment. The second one, of course, any new technology that's coming in will always be met with a lot of suspicion in the beginning. But I think it'll over time it'll get better, and then there'll be a middle ground in terms of. I also like the comment about like a lot of the middle managers, because one of the things that the companies are realizing is how do we make processes better and how do we create efficiencies better, right? Like the example I previously said is, let's say today if you're starting a startup, you have to have all these different small departments, right? But for an entrepreneur who is starting from the very beginning, it's very hard to finance all these things. So that's why today you have third parties. Like you can go to a payroll service that actually provides a SaaS payroll service, and you can go to a finance service that provides you forecasting capabilities. But everything is done through SaaS, software as a service, right? But tomorrow, AI is going to supercharge all these things. So technically, an entrepreneur could not only just have one company, could probably start 8 companies at the same time and run all of them. Right? It gives you a better creativity and innovate at a much bigger, at a much higher pace.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can look at all of the laws that are changing. You could adapt to laws very fast. You could get a traffic ticket and probably fight it with some of these AI technologies because they're at your fingertips now, as long as you get resources attached to them. I mean, there's a lot that can be useful and a lot that can also threaten people in terms of privacy and so forth. And we're going to take another break in just a second, but I just did something fun. I looked up, I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me 3 popular jokes. Here they are. Why did the tomato turn red? Because it saw the salad dressing. I told my wife she was drawing her eyebrows too high. She looked surprised. And why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. With that note, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with my guest, Brian, from Iterate AI. We're going to talk about some of the future things that we're looking for, take more of your phone calls. We will be right back. I'm Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and my guest has been Brian from iterate.ai, and this has been a great conversation about the AI technology. And I'm just curious, Brian, where do you see AI technology going in the next 5 to 10 years? What are you working on?
Well, we see that the AI technology is going to rapidly evolve, especially with this type of generative technologies. It's going to help, teams inside companies, all the way from marketing teams to create better content, to consumer teams and merchandising teams to create better personalization tool sets. Things are going to get much more easier and better. Of course, as we talked about, we are definitely going to have all the challenges, ethics, and all those things. But from the benefits of the technology, there's going to be a lot of touch points to consumers, throughout the industries. One of the things that we are working on is our platform is called Interplay. We provide a low code. What it means is really a drag and drop. Think of it like Lego, drag and drop platform for larger organizations. The challenge that we have is that today, as the industry is evolving and AI is growing at such a rapid pace, there is around 25 million web engineers, but there are only under 300,000 AI people in the world. And in fact, if you count AI-specific applied AI engineers, there's probably 50 to 60,000 people. So larger companies are really struggling to hire and retain AI talent because traditional companies whose core is not technology, they have to really have this talent. So we provide a drag-and-drop platform that can make all these things much better. As a part of that journey, what we are doing now is we are also enabling ChatGPT-type tools on top of it. So, for example, say you are a brand, but you want to take advantage of automated content generation, but you want to teach those AI systems about your products or your brand codes. You can load them into our system. So those are the type of things that we are working on and kind of take these generative technologies but provide the ability to customize for these brands and create content in a much more seamless way that's compliant with the brand. So those are the type of things that we are currently focusing on now on our drag-and-drop platform.
And it's called Interplay?
It's called Interplay.
Okay, great. Yes, we've got a caller coming in asking about Xander from New York. If we could get him on there, Michael. Xander, do you have a question for Brian?
How you doing, Miss? How you doing, Miss Garr and Mr. Brian? I have a question to ask you. According to these artificial intelligence AI, are these AIs going to be able to replace humans, or are they going to be working with humans? And also, I just had this kind of curious question. Will it be in the next 5 to maybe 10 years that the AI may be compatible with human intelligence?
And also be able to connect with your cell phones. So, Brian, is that technology you were talking about something that could be on the phone?
A lot of the technologies can work today on the phone. Your phones are getting faster and faster and more powerful day by the day. So a lot of the technologies that you see in the cloud will continue to work on your phone. The first question is that can AI replace humans? Absolutely not. I think what's going to happen is humans are going to be empowered by AI. There are certain jobs that humans did in the past may not be applicable anymore, but humans would have different set of skills, and then we would use AI as a tool, right? Think of it as a supercar that you can drive fast and you can get from place to place and surpass a certain velocity, right? So it will help our human evolution even better and much faster and quicker, right? So that's, I think, the answer to the first question. I think the second question is what could happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
I think this type of generative technologies are going to become mainstream, and you're going to see more and more advanced AI models coming in, and then you will end up seeing the whole idea of sentience or getting closer to a sentience, right? So the answers created by AI or image created by AI, music created by AI is going to look so close and as good as what humans can do, right?
Yes.
So that's where I think we are at. I think 3 years ago or even 4 years ago, we thought that day is probably 20 to 25 years from now, but it seems like it's more of a 10 years from now.
Well, we were just watching. There's a news station on in the background, and it showed a story that was being done right during this time about deepfake doing a simulation of Trump speaking. I don't know what he was saying because the sound is off, but that exact same thing that I was talking about, it showed how the AI technology created an exact image of him speaking as if it was him, but it wasn't really his words. So it's already happening, and they showed how it's created and how it's being used in politics specifically. It can be used in so many different ways. Yeah. All right, let's go to Jim in Newark, Delaware. Jim, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling in. Do you have a question for Brian?
Lisa, you have at all the hosts on Coast to Coast, you have the most attractive voice. I bet you've been told that many times.
Well, thank you very much. We'll do some AI on it, okay?
Oh, AI can exactly duplicate.
It can duplicate it, right?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, there's even these dating sites that are bogus. You think you pay $10. I'm just giving an example. You pay $10 and you only got 5 texts, and then it runs out, and so you're getting closer to liking this person, and so you pay the next $10. All they're doing is taking in money, and you never meet the person because we found out they're all robots.
Oh no!
We were texting with.
Oh no! Right. There's one that I just heard about on this station yesterday about dating site called Flame, Flamme, and it's a relationship site where you can literally type in, I don't know exactly what you are looking for to match up with you, and yes, it could very well be a robot. That is a great point. And so it's just it's a great topic to talk about, to not only be aware of the fact that yes, this is coming in like a high-speed train, but to really recognize how we need to be more scrutinizing around things like this fake technology coming through as if it's a real person. So thanks for that. I appreciate your input there. Thanks, Jim. Any comment on that, Brian?
I do agree with you because I think coming back to laws and how quickly can you apply laws, this is actually one of the areas where humans are taken advantage of. Companies take advantage of people's really emotional need to find another partner. I think this is actually a place where you can actually apply the law and not destroy the AI, right? That's why I think this is where laws have to catch up much faster.
Yes, I don't think that it could actually track me because I put in so many different things as a broadcaster. I'm searching up dating sites and Chinese balloons and then jokes. And it's probably wondering who I am. I love that. All right, let's do Andrew in Appleton, Wisconsin. Andrew, how you doing tonight?
Hey, how's it going? I'm just wondering, like, there's been examples of this already in the last couple of years, but I'm wondering, like, when will I be able to see Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney on the silver screen again?
Great question. That's more of a holograph, right?
No, you can actually build it's a great question. In fact, I've actually seen examples where people are trying to create brand characters and owners and founders of certain brands back again into real life. You can do that using something called synthetic AI. It's very similar to the type of generative technology that's today that is generating art, just like Stable Diffusion or DALL-E or any of those things. It's very similar. You could actually create back a video of the same person, of a person who has passed away. Say if you want to bring in Einstein back and talk to and address a series of students, at MIT, you could actually probably generate a video of Einstein. So a lot of that stuff is happening. I think this is again the positive side of synthetic creation, right? Where you can bring back somebody who has passed away, an iconic figure, and have them address the society or the students or a specific audience.
Fascinating. One of my superpowers that I would love to have in this lifetime is the ability to duplicate myself and be in two places at once. I've always wanted to do that.
I think that's a real need, Lisa. Because I have the same issue too. Because as being a founder of a company,
yes.
I have to run product teams, AI teams. I have to do work with business teams and customers and talking to customers, and also like being actively participating in social media. So today, if you look at my social feed, I use a third-party creation tool in my twitter.com/BrianVision. 80% of the articles that I share, I don't share it. It's actually generated through that generation mechanism.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So that allows you to sort of, really keep active in the space.
Fascinating. Oh, I can really understand that, right? Because a lot of CEOs do not have time for social media, yet it's important to stay relevant, and we all have FOMO. Let's go to Mike in Louisville, Kentucky. Hi, Mike. Do you have a question for Brian?
Yeah, I was just wondering if he had heard anything. There was a prominent YouTuber had posted a video saying that the ChatGPT had been corrupted. Someone had gone in and somehow maybe linked it or had it searched for a website called Do Anything Now.
Ooh, fun. And what is that? It got hacked.
It was, like I said, it was like maybe a minute and a half video, and I just didn't know if he had heard anything. Your screener had, said she had seen something, or she checked my question, so I guess that's how I got through.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I had just gone on to ChatGPT and I asked 3 jokes about Chinese balloons, and it said, we do not have any references about Chinese balloons. So it is definitely not updated. I have not seen anything on here about a hack. Had you heard anything about that, Brian?
No, Lisa, I haven't heard about it, but I'll definitely, after the show is over, I'll go and research it and look it up. But since ChatGPT is already a pre-trained model, and I don't think it's actively looking at your questions and retraining it, so I don't think any immediate such type of deviation type attacks cannot easily take place on it, because it's not learning real time and training itself, right? So that because of that reason, I think it's harder to break something like that. But I'll verify it. But one of the things one of the points that I want to highlight in the question that the caller had was it's a good question, because what happens is AI, a lot of AI systems, recommendation systems, and various systems used by retailers and others are prone to heavy threats, because somebody could feed these systems with false data. Let's say somebody is feeding that Lisa likes red shoes. You may not like red shoes, right? But it keeps on feeding that info, and you can actually make the AI learn the wrong thing. And such attacks can easily bypass all types of cybersecurity systems most of these companies have, because the cybersecurity systems are actually looking for threats that are trying to penetrate the company's systems or firewalls. Nobody is really looking at AI. So there is this ability to corrupt, learning and AI systems across many different places. So this is another emerging field where AI, shielding the AI and putting more security on top of the AI, to protect attacks like this. It's actually it's another evolving field. You will see this becoming more and more popular in the next couple of years. So even without being a hacker, you can track your own system, right? So like I've been doing researching many different, nothing I research has a theme to it at all, because it's always a different topic. So it won't have an easy time figuring out something that I want to hear, right? That's right. Absolutely. So that's a good way to confuse the technology so that your privacy is protected. So just randomly type in things that are completely irrelevant to you, and you won't get as many advertisements. By the way, what about that? Speaking to a friend, and your phone all of a sudden starts sending you advertisements of cars. If you're talking about, your car breaking down. I mean, how does that have anything to do with AI as well? It actually is a type of a retargeting type technology, right? I mean, there has been claims where like phones are listening, but I think a lot of the phone companies and like the operating system software, they claim that they don't listen to anything. But the thing is that it's very similar to this type of thing where you go to your computer, to your browser, and search for a Hawaiian vacation, and next time every website that you are in, it's actually bringing you Hawaiian vacation, even after you go on a real vacation and come back. So this type of retargeting technology is available everywhere, right? And I haven't spent time to validate whether the phone companies are really, or the manufacturers are really doing that in their systems or not. But that technology is completely possible today. You see that in the web every day. You worked at Apple for 6 years. How do you not know that? No, I think I worked on the first iPhone, but a lot of the stuff that's happening right now is very different, right? Because it's gone through, I think, 8 years of evolution. I left in 2007, so. Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a lot of that goes on. I mean, even the car technologies now have the voice-over activation, and you can easily be picked up by the car system, and it could link into your phone. I mean, there's so many different ways that it can reverse engineer your own interests and so forth. So, but just Absolutely. And also if you look at things like Alexa today, right? Earlier, like in the early versions of Alexa, like a few months back, maybe a year back, did not really play advertisements. So today they're trying to make it more conversational. So they're also playing a lot more ads, and ads are extremely relevant because you're asking it questions and it knows what you're asking. So it has a lot more advertisements. Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. Well, I think this has just been a fascinating conversation, and I thank you so much for playing along with me and answering all these questions. It obviously is a hot topic, brings up a lot, and we can look for either the interplay technology from you or the company iterate.ai, and those are the two ways we can find you. Is that right, Brian? Absolutely. Great. Well, you've been fantastic guest. Thank you so much for staying up with me tonight and giving us all this great information. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Lisa, for having me. It was a fun time talking to you. And also thank you to all the callers. Great questions. Excellent. Thank you. Great guest. And we will be right back. I am Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast Welcome AM. Back to Coast AM. We are changing the topic here from AI to something that really is also impacting our American population, which is these daunting statistics. 63% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 60% cannot afford an overture expense of $400. 18 million Americans go without medications that they desperately need, according to a Gallup poll. There are so many statistics like this. The SIP survey suggests that people in the U.S. owe at least $195 billion
collectively in medical debt. If you are one of these people or one of the 30 million people that the CDC says are underinsured or are not insured at all, this conversation tonight is for you. Joining me is Marianne Williamson. She is, for a long time, has been studying and a wonderful historian of the American story. She's not only the author of 14 books, 4 of which have been in the New York Times bestseller list. She has a beautiful quote that says, and it's from her bestseller book, A Return to Love, called, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." Marianne is going to be joining us next to talk about unlearning thoughts of fear and how we can replace these thoughts and with a new thought system based on love instead. We will be right back. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. Joining me is Marianne Williamson, who you might remember running for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020. And in 2021, she launched mariannewilliamson.substack.com, where you can listen to her opinions and incredible views addressing issues, American issues around mental health, physical health, loneliness, and depression and anxiety and addiction, and how real community and forgiveness and love really heals. And I'm so grateful to have Marianne as my guest tonight. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It's always so nice to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've always listened to you and loved your opinions. You've stretched me over the years from being just a host to being a bit of an activist. And I never thought that I could be that way. But what you say makes sense. And we were talking earlier about these statistics of how many people live paycheck to paycheck and can't afford an accidental expense or don't have insurance and are too afraid to call the doctor if they're going through a serious injury. This is the state of America today. It's not always been like this, though, has it?
No, it wasn't always like this. You know, in the 1970s, the average American worker could afford a car, could afford a house, could afford a yearly vacation, could afford to send their kids to college. And if one parent wanted to stay home and the other work, they could do that. That was in the 1970s.
Wow.
Now, I'm old enough to remember that. Many of us are. Many young people don't remember a time when the majority of Americans were not living with some kind of economic struggle. And with that struggle, of course, comes anxiety, depression, despair. We actually have the term, people use death by despair, depression, suicide, addiction. And many people are therefore feeling understandably abandoned by their government because neither of the major political parties is exactly sending out the cavalry to rescue people. That would be such things as universal health care. You know, Americans, they don't have health care, can't send their kids to college. Many of their kids are hungry. People are struggling to survive. And, you know, in every major advanced democracy except for ours, there is universal health care. And there is universal college, higher education, and tech school. And there is a guaranteed higher minimum wage and livable wage. So these things are considered moderate positions in other countries, and I think they should be considered moderate positions in ours. We're told, for instance, about universal health care, we couldn't have that. They have that in other countries, but those other countries are smaller. Interesting, China has it. China's not smaller. But in all these European countries, people say we couldn't have that because we're too big. But, you know, that's kind of like saying we can't have restaurants. We're too big. We can't have airlines. We're too big. That's just ridiculous. The things that people are told these days so that they're sort of convinced that things are better than they are. But I think the majority of Americans realize something's off here, that in the richest country in the world, so many people are living with economic struggle. And like I said, in a way that the average American was not 50 years ago.
What happened? Why is it this decline in this economic despair over the last 40 years, 50 years.
Starting in the 70s and 80s, there was an economics theory called trickle-down economics. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that if we based our economy on trying to make the rich richer by slashing their taxes, by cutting regulations that had to do with safety and health and well-being of the workers, by suppressing unions, by spending less on people and more in the private sector of the stockholder class, the propaganda that was given to people was that with all those rich people making so much money, they would create more jobs. It was called trickle-down economics. Mm-hmm. The more formal term is neoliberalism. It's the idea that all that money would accrue, and that money has been almost $50 trillion in the last 50 years has been transferred from the middle class to the top 1% of Americans. The idea was that all that money would trickle down and lift all boats. But now it obviously has not lifted all boats. It's left millions of people without even a life vest. So the Republicans started it, but no Democrat has stopped it. And every president, really Ronald Reagan was the one who really put it out big, but no Democrat. I
remember this, really. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. It started with Reagan, but neither major political party can be proud of itself on this. The Republicans are bought, hook, line, and sinker that somehow if, rich people have everything, it's better. And, of course, they throw a lot of propaganda around to make people think that other people are their problems rather than the economic system that sits on top of them. But the Democrats try to have it both ways. And, it's like the other night in the President's State of the Union, he was talking about how they're going to get rid of junk fees. Now, these junk fees are a big deal. It's hundreds of dollars a year, sometimes even more, that people pay in to airlines or, pay to banks. All that's important. But that's really, at the same time, distracting people from who you're really being stolen from. And that's the billions of dollars that are being stolen from you by health insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big oil defense contractors. All of that is just to take people, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats. There is a lot of distracting people from what's really going on, which is that neither one of them are providing health care. The Republicans want to take away even what they have. The Democrats came up with Obamacare, and that's certainly better than the nothing. The Republicans were trying to even repeal that.
Well, let's talk about kind of big pharma and how that has taken over, maybe together between big pharma and oil, $160 billion in profits in these last year.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. So there are Americans who die, right? 68,000 Americans die every year for lack of needed medical treatment. Think about that. Now, these other countries, other advanced democracies, they don't have that kind of thing. It doesn't even exist because they have universal health care. So we have 68,000 Americans who die every year for lack of needed medical treatment. Meanwhile, last year alone, 5 of the largest drug companies in the United States, you put the 5 together, they made $80 billion in profits. So, this is great for the stockholder class, but, this is not the way to run an economy, and this is not the way for the average citizen to receive what theoretically, that's what the American dream is supposed to be, that anyone has a shot. But somebody living in constant economic struggle doesn't have a shot.
Well, what is
people? I'm sorry, go on.
What does that do, this constant economic struggle, this constant fear, like you were talking about, that we've been fed this propaganda of fear for so long with the narrative? It is something we need to become aware of, first of all, that this is the narrative. That's the first step. And if we understand that we have to unlearn this entire thought system of fear, like you're talking about with the miraculous mind that we're going to talk about a little bit later. How do we unlearn this, Marianne?
Well, first of all, you can't say to people, even just to complete that last thing you were talking about, the pharmaceutical companies, you have Americans who stuck in jobs that they hate for no other reason than that they need to be there for the health insurance. Once again, you wouldn't have that with universal health care. So you can't say to that person, oh, it's just propaganda that you feel all this economic anxiety. No, it's not just propaganda. They don't know what they would do if their kid got sick. So, of course, it has created in everybody all of this like struggle that even people who are doing well accept the cost of things like medical care, the cost of things like sending your kids to college or tech school is so high. So many people are living with struggle that, of course, there's a mean-spiritedness in the air. You know, there's a lot of social media and so forth, and also the politicians saying the other party is the problem. But I think we have to also recognize that we're living in a society where when there is this much anxiety and there is this much sense of, oh, my God, just to make it, I have to work so hard. I don't have the time to be with my kids. I don't have the time to go to my kids' games. I can't get out. You know, my boss won't let me. It's difficult just to live these days. So on one hand, yes, we have to forgive each other. We have to have mercy. And we have to remember that no matter what your religion or what your view of the world, we're here to love one another. But at the same time, we also have to wake up and get these economic shackles off our backs, because it's a lot easier to be loving. It's a lot easier to be forgiving. It's a lot easier to be merciful. It's a lot easier to contribute to your community when you're not living in this constant economic survival mode. Yeah, so it's got to be both and. It's got to be, we've got to change the world, and we have to change ourselves.
You know, I listen, I think about our wonderful brothers and sisters who are driving right now in the trucking community, listening to this show, and what they are doing to leave their families, to make ends meet, to support their families, and they have this show, or they have their community when they go to rest stops, or they have an understanding, you know, through their radios, and there's a way to connect with each other. I think that just act alone of community, something that we provide here on the radio, or that you can find in your local industry or neighborhood, is also a way to start to create change. We've seen so many grassroots movements happen this last 3 years, from anything that has to do with Me Too or Black Lives Matter or environmental or anything that comes from the power of the people rising up for something that they stand for, that they believe in. It starts with your community, a like-minded people, right?
Well, I think it starts with the people who are in your life right now. I think it's not just going out and finding a community sometimes. It's asking about your relationship with your lover, with your friend, with your spouse, with your children, with your parents. If we just take the people who are already in our lives and ask us, if I am on this earth, if God put me here to be a vessel of love, if the commandment that I believe is we are here to love one another, do my children feel that from me the way they might? Does my wife or husband feel that from me, my lover, my friends, my parents? So I think the community that we most need to build is with the people in our own lives. You know, it feels to me, Lisa, like the entire society, it's like a fabric that has been ripped. And we all know this. But it's not going to be just the big acts that are going to fix this. It's one stitch at a time. One friend that we could call and say, hey, buddy, I hear it's been hard for you. How you doing? One person. Sometimes that we know, well, you know, I'm having a fight with that person, but maybe I did have a little something to do with that, and I should own my part and apologize. One child who really does need us to go, you know, play ball with him, and it would mean so much to him if Dad was at the game, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's right here in front of us sometimes. I don't think it's an accident who God puts in our lives. And
true.
Most of the people in our lives are hungry for more love from us. We're sometimes thinking so much about the love we're not getting, and I think we need to do a lot more thinking about the love we're not giving.
Right. It is. And it's, you know, if you think about someone in your life right now who is struggling, who might be sick or might be have lost a loved one or a job or however the loss has occurred, just to send that person a simple message goes such a long way. I think as a humanity, if we had just a little more compassion, it could be for humans or animals or earth or whatever it is, just an ounce more compassion, it would be such a different level. And I see that as a possibility.
You know, you said a minute ago something about someone you know who might be going through something like they lost a loved one or some other dramatic incident in their life that makes them in need. I think that something happens when we realize most people you know are going through more than you know. You know, at my lectures, I used to say to people, think about the greatest moment of pain you've ever had. Could have been physical pain, it could have been emotional pain, but just think about the biggest moment of pain you've ever had. And then I said, it is statistically reasonable to assume that the person to your right has suffered that much too. It's statistically reasonable to assume that the person to your left and the people in front of you and the people behind you, that each one of those people has suffered that much too. You know, there was a great writer, Victor Hugo, and he said, every time you meet someone, remember you are in the presence of a great war. Most people have more inner scars than we tend to remember and realize. And I think sometimes we're so concerned with our own internal scars and wounds and pain that we forget how much of that pain of life other people are going through too. You might be around someone that you think is going fine. You don't know what's happening in their marriage. You don't know if their child might be addicted to drugs. You don't know.
Right.
And I think if we start with that, you know, you just kind of walk into a room and just pray in whatever way you pray. May I be an instrument of love. Blast the room with love before you go. Remember that life is hard. We're all very clear life is hard for us. But I think sometimes we need to remember life is hard for other people too.
Especially what you said, that death by despair, and that it could be death from loneliness, right?
Oh, listen, that's what the suicide rate in this country.
Yes.
I mean, it's off the charts, what they call a mental health crisis. No, death by despair is now a term that's used very commonly. That's what the suicide rates, so many of the drug overdoses. No, this country, we know these things are happening. We know these things are happening, and politicians like to talk about other things rather than really addressing some of these underlying causes. And I think that people are waking up, though. There's nobody who's listening to us right now who doesn't know what we're talking about.
Very, very true. Very true. We're going to take a quick break, Marianne. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some of the thought systems that Marianne does talk about in A Course of Miracles and some of the texts from there as well. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr, and my guest is Marianne Williamson. We've been talking about the state of the world today and how many Americans are feeling this level of anxiety or depression or despair, and how we can change that level of thinking. And although the statistics are daunting, Marianne, how can we use any type of discipline of your mind to bring about some type of good for yourself or others? Is there anything that you recommend? I know that you're a big student of A Course in Miracles.
Well, it has to begin on the inside, of course, and many people pray, many people meditate. Anything that has to do with finding that love inside yourself. Sometimes we are so wounded and hurt by life that we become hard. And we put a shell around ourselves so we won't be hurt by anyone again. But putting up that shell and putting up those walls actually invites more hurt. Because when we do put up a wall, what we're really saying deep in our hearts is, someone please love me. But we deflect, we send away the love, the relationships, the goodwill that we most want. So it does begin with waking up in the morning and just sending love out to everybody you're going to see today. People say, oh, that's silly. Well, it's funny to hear when, theoretically, isn't that what the words of Jesus were, that we should love one another? The words of Buddha were infinite compassion brings happiness. The words of the Old Testament, justice, justice, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with thy God. And many people who don't relate specifically to a particular religious philosophy are coming to understand we've all got to find that inner quiet within ourselves. I think between social media, the fact we're all on our tablets, we're on our people, we go to the dinner table and our kids are on their computers, they're on their tablets, or on their iPads or iPhones. We've got to discover each other again. And I think that takes some discipline because, for one thing, as far as those tablets are concerned, we're all addicted, and we know it. And they're
designed that way, yes.
They're designed to addict us.
Uh-huh.
And we all, it has to start in our own families. It has to start in our own homes. It has to start with parents saying, you're not going to bring that to the dinner table. It has to start with our talking to one another again. I mean, and just asking the God of your understanding, make me an instrument of love. Make me a person who contributes to other people. Help me not worry about myself so much that I'm not thinking about how many other people are in the same boat that I'm in, going through the same struggles that I'm going through. That's the only way. There aren't any silver bullets that's going to heal everything.
Right.
But if there's ways, the only thing that's going to dissolve all the hate that's in the air is if we put out more love. Love is the only thing that can drive out hate. Love is the only thing that can drive out darkness.
You've been a student and a teacher of Course in Miracles for many, many, many years. I've followed your daily lessons from the Course. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is? Was it a channeled text?
Well, the Course in Miracles, no book like the Course in Miracles has a monopoly on truth. It's a psychological mind training based on universal spiritual themes. So people from all religions read the Course. People from no religions read the Course. It's simply about recognizing the power of the mind and that every single thought we think carries with it the capacity to affect our lives and the lives around us. Not just everything we do, but everything we think. And we are trained in this world, and we're trained by the narratives of this world. And in many ways, we're tempted, because of all the anxiety that we've been talking about here tonight, to be very judgmental and very mean. So-and-so's the problem. That group of people is the problem. And we can disagree about things, like when we were talking politically before. It's important to have passionate disagreements or to call systems to account that are unjust. Mm-hmm. But we don't have to personally demonize one another. And once again, it's on social media. It's in too much of the media. We are far too indulgent of hatred in our hearts. And we ourselves are responsible for transforming our lives on the inside. We have rights to expect our government to do a whole lot more than it now does to help transform things on the outside. But none of that is a substitute for the changes that we have to make inside our hearts. Everybody who's listening right now, even think of just one person, and everybody who's listening, there's one person who, if you forgave that person, your whole life would change. Because you are holding on to resentments, and you're holding on to grievances. You're holding on to what they did to you. And so you're not letting life begin again. You're not letting, the way the universe works is kind of like a GPS. If you took the wrong turn, the GPS will automatically recalibrate. Well, that's how life works. Somebody treated you without love. You did something without love. Somebody else did something to you. You did something stupid. We all have those things. We all have those things. It's so important to remember that, Lisa. We all have those things. But life is created to give you another path. but not if you're holding on to the resentments. Not if you're holding on to the, what they did to me. Then you get a chip on your shoulder. And then you actually subconsciously invite more of the same kind of experience that you're so upset about. And life compounds the pain. And then you say, see, nothing ever changes.
Mm-hmm.
It has to begin with us. It has to begin with atoning in our hearts for the mistakes we've made and praying in whatever way we pray or asking, whatever language works for us, that we ourselves might change and be more open-hearted. Every thought we think is either an open-hearted response to life or a response to life that is a hardened heart. And when the heart is open, we attract good things. We attract people who want to be with us. We attract love. We attract happiness. But when our hearts are shut tight, what we attract is pain. And what we attract is other people who are shut down to us the way we're shut down to them. And, everybody's listening, recognizes everything I'm saying, because this is just a human experience.
Yes, it definitely is. I was listening to a lecture from Lynn Twist, and she wrote a book recently about the prophecies that she's gained from her years and years with the Pachamama Alliance visiting indigenous tribes. And there's a prophecy amongst these tribes, collectively, 20 or 30 of these tribes, of the eagle and the condor. And I don't know the exact timing, but it's something about being in the last 100 years of this 500-year cycle, where the beginning of this cycle was very tumultuous, very dark, very much filled with contrast, as we've seen the first 23 years of this 100-year cycle we're in. But where the prophecy says that we're moving is more towards this light, more towards humanity coming together, more towards hope, more towards solution and resolution. And so this conversation is apropos to that, because you're talking about, yes, these daunting statistics and the place that humanity is in right now, specifically Americans in this country, very, very, a lot of despair. Yet this conversation needs to go towards that level of hope. What do you feel is possible, Marianne? What do you see in the next 20 years?
Well, we're living in two simultaneous realities.
Right.
One world is clearly falling apart around us. There's no doubt about it. Our institutions, our environment, our democracy, things are crumbling. And clearly there is the end days of a certain era. But at the same time, as you've been talking about on the show tonight, wonderful things are happening. And a new world, there's an Indian writer, Arundhati Roy, and she said there is a new world that is struggling to be born. We feel that too. And I think in that space called God, or whatever we want to call it, there is infinite capacity to transform, to change, to begin again. All of us have, that's the mercy of God, is part of the power of faith that, I love the story in the Bible of the prodigal son. The father is more excited to see the son who left and came back than to see the son who had never left. We've all made our mistakes. We've all fallen down. But the issue in life is getting back up. Hemingway, the writer, said, life breaks everyone, but some people grow stronger in the broken places. Well, that's happening too. What's happening is regeneration. What's happening is repair. But what we have to understand, I think, is that with every thought, every action, everything we do with our lives, we are either contributing to the energy of the downward spiral of our civilization, or we are contributing to the upward spiral. And, there are so many ways that solutions are available today, from regenerative agriculture to green energy to new ways of doing community and economics and business. The problem is the people who have the power aren't applying the solutions because they don't necessarily make quick corporate profits, and the people who have the solutions don't necessarily have the power. So we're living in this time of struggle. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's a time of great hope and possibility, because if you believe in a power higher than we are, greater than we are, that lives within us, then the possibility of what God can do, there's a line, God can only do for us what he can do through us. But if we surrender our lives and ask that our lives be used as instruments of good and peace and this extraordinary revolution of consciousness and love that is trying to take place, then you start attracting more people who have that same kind of consciousness, the same kind of mindset. You stop attracting people around you who are just saying, ain't it awful? You start attracting more people who are inviting you into the space of relationship and circumstance, where people are doing cool new things. Those things are happening, and we ourselves, I think, have to take responsibility for which one of those things we're putting our attention to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's according to the prophecy and what you're talking about, these two worlds existing now, and I'm sure astrologically this is all being supported, that we're in this transition, I feel, is taking place. But do you have any evidence of the fact that we are transitioning towards this more hopeful future, a more connected humanity?
Well, I think we need to realize which way it will go is up to us. That's the thing. It's not, one of my least favorite comments or one of my biggest peeves is when people say, well, we'll see, as though we have no power. I think it's true that on an external level, the average American has much less power to change their circumstances than we should have, for all the things we were talking about, lack of health care and all that kind of stuff. But internally, we have the power. Nobody can determine for you how you choose to live your life. No one can determine for you where you put your attention. No one can determine for you whether you're going to spend your life blessing other people or blaming other people, whether you're going to be an instrument of forgiveness or you're going to be an instrument of judgment. Only we can, only you can determine that for yourself. And, nobody should just believe me because I said it, or because anyone else said it. Try it and see. And I just know in my own life, when I always say, Lisa, when I practice what I preach, my life works really well. None of us get there 24 hours every day. But when we seek in whatever situation to be kinder, to ask about other people's issues and not just our own, to ask how we can be an agent of betterment in somebody else's life, we are participating in a fundamental movement on the planet away from darkness and into light. And otherwise, with the state of our democracy, with the authoritarian stresses, with the stress of environmental breakdown, with the economic inequality, if we do not consciously exert a proactive effort to move in the direction of the light, then the darkness could definitely overwhelm us, and we shouldn't kid ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
This civilization could go through chaos, the likes of which we've never known in our lifetime.
Yes, there are. I love that we're talking about this, that we have the power to change our thoughts, our neurology towards this conversation or towards a more hopeful conversation. Yes, we're aware of the statistics. And yes, there is an onset of even new technologies. The first part of tonight's show is talking all about AI and ChatGPT and this whole level of technology that's going to accelerate over the next 10 months, likely what we've seen in the past 10 years. And if just an ounce of this could be used towards good, how do I create a more positive future? How do I learn to love my neighbor? How do I be kind to one person a day? That could be used towards anything that could create or generate goodness. It would make sense. It would make so much more sense. And then that could start to generate more of the same, like it does in AI.
Well, also, when you say, how do I? It's just, there is no how to this. You decide to. I realized a few years ago that the best advice I can give myself, I'm telling you, 90% of the time when I have a problem, the answer is some form of, oh, Marianne, get over yourself.
Yes.
Think about somebody whose life is a little harder than yours right now, and how could you help? Just that kind of thinking begins to transform everything. You know, Martin Luther King had a term, cosmic companionship. When you show up with that kind of thought, and, I know, it's so interesting. I love live radio for this reason. There are people right now who I know are listening to us thinking about, people in their lives and their families going, yeah, I've probably been tough, or yeah, I haven't been communicative, or yeah, I've been shut down, or yeah, I didn't even remember her birthday, or yeah, I could have been there for the kids more, whatever it is. But, I think there's a term, lean in.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, you can't say to yourself, completely change, Marianne, be completely different. No, life, it's hard. But what you can say is just lean in.
Yes, we are actually going to take calls for this next hour, Marianne, with people who can call about that. Call about what have you maybe been inconsiderate about in your life, and how do you want help around something like that to be more conscious. We will be right back. I am Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast to Coast. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr. My guest is Marianne Williamson. And by the way, if you go to her website, marianne.com, there's a wonderful course that she's teaching right now called The Miraculous Mind. And it is about that way to learn how to walk in this wonderful, miraculous path. And it's a program that you can listen to, even though it started in end of January. You can listen to the recordings, and it's a wonderful way to really pave the way to have an extraordinary 2023. And you can check all of that out at marianne.com. All right, Marianne, do you want to go? And by the way, is that true that if people join now, they can listen to
absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Lots of, a whole board full of callers coming in. We have a lot of work to do. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Great. Let's go to our first-time caller, Rick in Phoenix. Wonderful question. Rick, how was the Super Bowl?
Oh, it was amazing.
It was right there in your hometown.
I loved both teams at the end. I was sorry one of them had to win.
I know. So what is your question here for Marianne?
Yes, ma'am. I ask people whether they'd like to be treated with love or justice. And I met a very smart neighbor one day, and she said, if you treat them with love, you can be guaranteed it will result in justice. And I don't agree with that. I think people can use being loved to steal, really, from other people what they worked hard for. And how does society translate into political system where people like my father, who worked 6.5 days a week, 12 hours a day in a delicatessen in New York City, and I helped him, and they would take from him everything, the politicians of New York City, to buy votes. And I would guess they portrayed themselves as lovers of people and caring for people. How do you reconcile those two things, justice and love?
Great question.
Well, that's a big issue in America today. Private love versus public justice. So there are some people who say that all that matters is private love, that you be good to your family. But then there are people like this gentleman's father. Look at how, for instance, union busting, deregulation so that the safety regulations at a factory are taken away, economic justice, where you have these huge tax cuts for the rich, decreased spending on public things like schools, and increased spending on things like corporate subsidies. So I think what this gentleman is saying is really true. Private love is not enough. No private love and no private charity can compensate for a basic lack of social justice. That's why you need things like unions. That's why you need things like fair taxes. That's why you need things like investments in schools. That's why you need things like healthcare. All those things, healthcare is a justice issue. It's not a private love issue, but it is a public love issue. We have children in America who go to bed hungry. We're the richest country in the world. So we can say we love our kids, but the love that will save the world at this point is not just love for our own children. It's love that has to include love for children on the other side of town, and ultimately even on the other side of the world. So we have to think in terms of love that goes beyond our private sphere. And when you do that, you're not saying, I want to have a personal love for somebody I've never met. But justice is an aspect of the face of love. Justice is an aspect of the face of God. You can't just say, well, I'm loving to my kids, I'm loving to my family. Particularly at this time, it's not enough.
Right.
We have to think in terms of love of the commons, love of the public good, and that's where justice comes in.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, look at the people, look at the situation in Turkey and Syria. I mean, 34,000
Well, that's an interesting one because in Turkey, they are recognizing that there were all of these contractors and all of these builders. You saw this with a building that collapsed in Florida a few years ago, not that long, a couple of years ago, I think. People cut corners. And in Turkey, I mean, it's terrible. They're detaining people at airports, contractors and builders who had saved money by putting cheaper materials in the cement and all that kind of stuff. But even then, it's traced back to political corruption because they're tracing it back to politicians who deregulated the building, the construction industry so that they would get more votes. So that's why corruption is something that all of us need to be
perfect example of what our friend was talking about in Phoenix. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you for your call. Let's go to Thomas in La Jolla, California. Thomas, one of our regulars. How are you?
Good evening, Lisa. It's always a pleasure to hear your voice on the airwaves. And Marianne, you're an angel. And I have a comment and a question, Marianne. And my comment is, I remember in the last election, you were on the debate floor, and there was Marianne Williamson, there was Tulsi Gabbard, there was Amy Klobuchar, there was Elizabeth Warren, there was Kamala Harris, all women. And I feel like when we have dysfunctions like 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. We're the only country in the world that has an electoral college that overturns the popular vote. And I believe the opposition to Hillary was not that she was a Democrat, but that she was a woman. And I feel the same way that the opposition to people like Marianne Williamson is that you're a woman. My assistant, who works for me, is a young lady from New Zealand, where the majority of the legislature are women, and the prime minister up to recently was a woman. And I feel like the sensibility of this country would change if the 535 members of Congress matched the diversity of the population, meaning that at least half were women. And I was wondering, which brings me to my question, Marianne, how do we bring more women into governance?
Great question. Great question. Marianne?
Well, first of all, we should celebrate that there certainly are more than there were, for instance, when I was growing up. But I think you're right. I think that there is, there's a term, covert racism, hidden racism, subconscious racism. And I think that there's a lot of covert, subconscious, hidden misogyny as well. I think the suspicion of women, almost this suspicion of women, this projection of weakness onto women, even a hatred of women, sometimes is internalized in a society and at a very young age. So you're right. I mean, I don't think that everybody's vote against Hillary was because she was a woman, but I do think that Americans do not yet have the habit. You know, we haven't had a woman president yet. I think it's changing. I think we're getting there. I actually think that the American people are ready, but it's going to take all of us addressing our own internal prejudices. You know, I can say as a woman, it makes me very happy, and I'm sure Lisa feels the same way, to hear a man, yourself in this case, to express the desire to see us have a greater say in what happens in the country. But I also have to tell you this, even talking about my having run for president, some of the meanest smears against me, people lying about me, people mocking me, people insulting me, were women. So sometimes the greatest projection, which is basically misogynist onto women, comes from other women. So those of you who have sons, please teach your sons to honor women, starting with honoring their mothers. But also, like when I was growing up, the feminism of the 1970s included a sense of sisterhood that you don't see enough of now. Lisa, you and I and friends that we have definitely understand how important it is for women to support other women, and we know what that means to us. But I see too many women who are still thinking
competition
that they can get ahead without supporting other women in doing so. So we all have work to do, and it begins, like all of this stuff, inside our own hearts and minds.
Right. Great point, though. Thank you so much, Thomas. Good to hear from you. Let's go to Dawn in Canada. Dawn, do you have a comment or a question for Marianne Williamson?
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Marianne. You were just talking about Turkey, and there's a few things that you might want to look up. There's one where I'm not sure who she was in Parliament, but she actually did a talk. But just before this earthquake happened, 10 to 12 days, a lot of the officials were told to leave the country. And there's no epicenter in this earthquake. And the other thing is Turkey was getting ready to pull out of NATO and wasn't allowing, I think it was Sweden in. Anyway, but that's all. You can go and do your own investigation. I was trying to pull up the details before I came on the air. But anyway, so 12 people, I read ancient texts, and it said 12 people in collective coherence could create instantly. Greg Braden's been on a couple times talking about things like that. But anyway, why can't, I've spent my entire life trying to find 12 people or even 3 people to go in collective coherence, but when love, I don't know, love is kind of a misguided word. It makes people do crazy things. Like it doesn't, I don't know how to explain it.
I hear what you're saying.
They're missing what love really is, I guess, is the point. And it just, other than that, I don't.
In your experience, yes, I understand that coming from where you're at, that it's hard to find people who have a collective sense of what your meaning of love is all about. And is there, Marianne, a way that you can advise someone to find people that are like-minded?
First of all, the Course in Miracles says, this course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love. It aims at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. I don't think we have to go find other people who are loving. I think we need to ask how loving we are. And I don't think love makes us crazy. I think lovelessness makes us crazy. I think love is the only sanity. I mean, look at other species. Look at how the mama bear, the mama tiger, the mama lion takes care of her cubs. Look how we take care of little ones. If we didn't take care of our babies, they wouldn't survive. What is that love in us that makes us take care? What is it that all of us like looking on the internet right now, all these pictures of these babies that are being saved from the rubble? Love is our sanity. It's the fact that we had put other things before love. If you put something like, okay, let's look at the fact that the environment and climate change and the awful things we're doing to the planet and continued fossil fuel extraction, which we know are putting, the scientists are saying if we continue with the heating of the planet, we might not even be habitable as a planet within 100 years. That's because we're putting the money, the short-term profits for big oil before love. So no, I don't think love makes us crazy. I think love makes us sane. And I think the fact that so much in the world is insane today is because we're not making love our bottom line. We're making short-term corporate profits our bottom line. There's nothing loving about allowing children to go hungry in America. There's nothing loving about allowing people to lack health care, unable to get their medicines. The chemicals that we allow to be in our waters, the chemicals we allow to be in our food, the chemicals allow to be in our air, all that is because we're unloving, not because we're loving. I think love is the answer. And I don't think, you say love makes us do crazy things. Yeah, it makes you call somebody too often who doesn't want to be with you anymore. You know what I'm saying? Or sometimes people become totally obsessed and do quote unquote crazy things in the name of love. But in those cases, they have exited the realm of love and they're in the realm of narcissism or whatever.
Right.
But, I think love is the only sanity that there is.
It's a different place. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for that call and question. It's good to bring up, contrast creates clarity. And when you find out the opposite of love, that makes you deepen into what love really can be. And it's definitely an experience, and it's got to, as you said earlier, that life breaks everyone, and it does create that contrast. So it helps us deepen what we believe in.
The Course. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the Course in Miracles, Lisa, says that there are only two emotions, love and fear. That love is to fear what light is to darkness. You can't get rid of the darkness by hitting it with a baseball bat. You can only get rid of darkness by turning on the light. And similarly, this idea that which is not love is fear. We think of anger, negativity, neediness, selfishness, but all of those things are just expressions of lack of love and the fear that we go into inside ourselves that then gets expressed in that negativity. When you see that, then you say to yourself, no matter what my negative emotion, my first question can be, who am I not forgiving, including myself? It's a radical departure from the sort of common psychotherapeutic perspective that we analyze our fear. That's like analyzing darkness. You can't analyze it, you replace it. And when we start seeing all the negativity that we carry in ourselves as a place where we need to love more, to forgive someone, to contribute more, then it's amazing how things begin to change.
Beautiful. All right, we're going to take another quick break and come back with your phone calls and Marianne Williamson. This is Lisa Garr. You're listening to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast AM. I am Lisa Garr. My guest is Marianne Williamson, and we've been talking about the miraculous mind. Marianne, is there, we're going to go back to callers in just a second, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about before we go back to callers?
No, I mean, I think that we all realize that our civilization is in transition, but we need to begin a new chapter. We need a new beginning. We need to reject and to push away some of the forces that have been really oppressing this society economically over the last 50 years. We need to stand for something better for ourselves and for our children. And to do that, we have to recognize that the system weighs us down. People are just weighed down, but we're going to have to fight that within ourselves and show up for this moment in the world. And I think more people are realizing that. There's an awakening. More people who are understanding what's going on the outside, more people who are trying to transform our lives on the inside. And every day we can feel I'm participating in that new world that is struggling to be born. I'm participating in standing for the we don't need an army of the left or an army of the right. We need an army of the good We need what Martin Luther King called a coalition of conscience. And I think that's happening. I do think that's happening, Lisa, but I think it's a kind of race for time. When hatred is talking so loud right now, love cannot afford to be silent. We cannot afford to whisper. We need to make a stand for love. We need to make a stand for justice. We need to make a stand for the public good. We need to make a stand for our planet. We need to make a stand for our children. We need to make a stand for our health. We need to make a stand for healthy food. We need to make a stand for healthy air. We need to make a stand for healthy water. No one is going to do it for us. And if we just on any given day say, what can I do? What can I do to be a better person and to make the world a better place? Then there is going to be this upward spiral. Then we do have that cosmic companionship that Martin Luther King talked about. That's the revolution of this time. You know, John F. Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. These are revolutionary times. We need a peaceful, positive, loving revolution. Otherwise, there's going to be something that's very chaotic and the opposite of love. And once again, it's just each and every one of us has to make a decision for ourselves. Will I be part of the new chapter? Will I be part of the new beginning? If we surrender our lives to that process, may I be used for the purposes of love, may I be used for the purposes of justice, then we're going to see changes in our lives. And ultimately, we're going to see changes in our country and changes in our world.
Yes, I mean, what you said earlier, that there are two worlds existing right now, and that's kind of good news, because at least the second one exists, you know?
It exists, and we need to build on it. We need to build on it. That's all. We need to build on it. We need more of that on social media. We need more of that in our politicians. We need more of that in our economics. We need more of that in our schools. We need more of that in our businesses. And all of us can play a part.
Yes, and having the conversation is also important. Let's go to Hannah in Jacksonville, Florida, who has studied the course for many, many years. Hi, Hannah.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Love and light, Miss Marianne, you're wonderful. I agree with everything that you're saying. I have a question, I guess, you know, having listened to you from, 20 years old and growing up with you, when I don't know, maybe I'm a young soul or something, but I'm in my mid-40s and everything has been turned upside down, and I don't understand when you do everything, when you practice what you preach and live that way and see the universe in a wonderful way. I guess I'm just dumbfounded by the evil and everywhere.
That still exists.
And I guess you can't make the stuff up that, if I was to communicate with you what has actually transpired in my life. And I just, how do you overcome that when all else is, failed? I truly don't think I've ever loved before or given myself 100% because I've been terrified to. However, I've walked the good.
Yeah. So you're right. It does exist. And Marianne, how can Hannah stay the course when such of a dichotomy still exists?
Well, first, Hannah, remember, you said that you're a student of the Course in Miracles. There is a line in the Course, there is no order of difficulty in miracles. And when we feel like everything's upside down, like you said, girl, you pray for a miracle. You say, God, this is bigger than I can handle. But I have faith that there is a power in me, but not of me, that can do for me what I cannot do for myself. And I pray for a miracle. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can always control who we choose to be in the space of what happens to us. And that's where the miraculous breakthrough comes from. So I know for myself as a student of the Course, and listen, there's no religion, no particular path has a monopoly on truth. So whatever yours is, for me, it's doing those workbooks, lessons in the Course every day. When you do it, it works. It's like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you do them, they work. It's like going to the gym. If you do it, it works. So every day, spend 5 minutes on whatever your prayer or meditation practice is. Spend that time in quiet with the God of your understanding. Send love to everyone involved. And in specific circumstances that seem upside down to you, pray for a miracle. Just pray for a miracle.
We do have to focus on what we want. There is a lot of, it's easy to focus on what we don't want or what exists. In order to change it, you've got to go to that leap of faith, imagination as to what you do want, and focus on it every day, right?
Well, so much has gone crazy. It's like we're not even imagining. We're not even imagining a world of peace anymore. We're not even imagining an earth and a sky and then oceans that are healed. We're not even imagining a vibrant economy in which everyone gets to participate. Our imaginations have been shrunk because we're so inundated with the bad news and the decline and the devolutionary spiral. But, one of the gentlemen who called in a few minutes ago was talking about coherence of 12 people. When an idea is shared, it's stronger. We have too many people sharing the negative right now. Like if we're thinking, God forbid, about terrorists, right? And sometimes we read about terrorist cells. We know that one terrorist is a bad thing, but when they get together in groups, it's really bad. Well, the same is true of love. We need cells of love. And the more we join in conversations about possibility, that's what, when you look at the churches and the synagogues that used to be filled in this country, we whether it's an outside structure or in your own heart, whatever your religion or your spirituality, there's the revolution that will save us is the revolution of love.
It's
and in love, and this is what I would say to Hannah, where there is love, miracles occur naturally. So in all those situations that are hard for you, Hannah, ask who you're not forgiving, atone for your own mistakes, and do the work, whether it's Course in Miracles or any other. And, if we do the work, it cannot not work. But I join with you in praying for a miracle for you because we all need them.
That's beautiful. And for all of our, listeners, we're definitely praying for miracles. Let's go to Maria in Illinois, who has a question for you. Hi, Maria. Do you have a question for Marianne Williamson? Maria in Illinois. Maria?
Yeah.
Hi. Oh.
Hey.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking my call.
Did you have a question for Marianne?
Yeah. Well, actually, it wasn't a question. I had a couple of comments. And I wanted to relay my experience with some of the things I'm going through. So I'm on disability, and I'm on a limited type of Medicaid, but it's not. I don't even really get Medicaid because they consider me that I have too much money, even though I get a limited.
To qualify.
Right. And so for me to even get a medical card, my spend down would have to be almost $600 a month. That I would have to literally pay in to get a medical card. I mean, if I had that kind of money, I wouldn't need to be in Medicare.
Medicare, right, exactly.
What you were saying about the healthcare is a big thing, as it is, because of the pandemic. We had, some extra SNAP link food stamps and some extra Medicaid in the last couple of years because of the pandemic. But now that that's ending, all that's going to be gone, and so we're supposed to, I guess, live on $20 a month for food stamps.
Well,
and you try to tell a lot of people in this country that, they'll be like, well, we're not a socialist country. How dare you talk about socialism, and you're just a left-wing socialist, but yet it's serving people well in other countries over in Europe. We are the only civilized Western country in the Western Hemisphere that does not have health care or anything like that, like they do over there.
Let me ask
It always amazes me how.
Your question,
I have to. I'm sorry.
Go
Can
ahead.
I say a couple of things?
Yeah.
First of all, during the pandemic, tens of thousands of essential workers died, while billionaires became $2 trillion richer. So when those people say to you, "Oh, you just want to be a socialist," ask them if they want to give up their Social Security. Social Security came from the Socialist Party. What do they think Medicare is? Medicare is basically a socialist program. So do they want to give that up? So this whole anti-socialist thing is a propaganda. That's all it is. It's propaganda. We are trained in this country to expect too little. So like you were saying, Maria, people are waking up and going, well, why can't I have universal health care if they have it in every other country? Why can't I have free college and tech school if they have it in every other country? They have it in countries where the government sees it as its task to help people thrive. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. So what Maria is describing is a situation where she can survive, but she cannot thrive. The purpose of government, if you look at our Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. God gave all men inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Government is instituted to secure those rights, not to thwart those rights, to secure those rights. And if the government is not doing it, the people have the right to alter that. This whole anti-socialist thing, by the way, what do you think the police department is if not a socialist institution? What do you think the fire department is if not a socialist institution? Mm-hmm. If you look at the countries in Europe that have the highest, we're not even in the top 10 rating of happiest citizens. Those who are, they have hybrid economies. Of course you want to have capitalist, free market. You want to have capitalism, of course. But, even Adam Smith, who was the main articulator of free market capitalism, said it cannot exist outside an ethical context. What has happened in the last 50 years is an unregulated, unfettered form of capitalism that it has no guardrails. It has no sense of ethical responsibility. It's all about the idea of short-term corporate profit, even at the expense of the worker, at the expense of the safety, the health, and the welfare of the workers, the citizens, and the earth and the animals. That's not what capitalism should be. That's capitalism weaponized against people. An economic system should serve the people. People talk about weaponizing the government. That's an economic system that has been weaponized. It serves 20% of our people. 20% of Americans are doing fine. But 20%, that means 80% of Americans
are not
living there's a vast sea of economic despair out there. And this whole anti-socialism thing it's a PR scam. That's all it is. And when you talk about countries that have socialized medicine, that have socialized education and so forth, by the way, we have socialized education from K through 12. So what's the difference if you say just extend it? That's all the people are saying. Free college say it should be higher than 12, which is what people earlier in this country had wanted. Those countries that have the socialized medicine, that have those systems, they also have great capitalist economies. They have more people getting rich than we have here. So people really need to figure out that the American people have been played. The American people have been played. And it's time for us to interrupt a corrupt status quo that will not disrupt itself, because the people in power are getting those campaign donations from all those corporations, whether it's insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big oil companies, big food companies, gun manufacturers, defense contractors, big chemical companies, agricultural companies. They are a new aristocracy in this country. It's called the corporatocracy. It's like we repudiated that kind of aristocratic nonsense when we founded this country, and it's time for us to reject it again. Maria, when she spoke of her situation just now, there are millions of Marias, and it shouldn't happen in this country.
And they're all calling in. I mean, this is the a microcosm here that we're looking of America, and call after call after call is I've done everything you've said and lost everything, and I have this trouble and accidents and things that are just falling apart.
Yes. So those are the calls that are coming in and writing on your computer there?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, wait till next weekend, everybody. I'm going to make an announcement. I'm going to have something to say because we can change this, but only we can change this, because you cannot leave it to the political establishment to change it. The political establishment is now a system of legalized bribery that is so under the dictatorial control of the lobbying. There are so many lobbyists for every legislator.
You would know.
That's right.
You're in it.
Lobbying,
yes, you're in it.
Those corporate donations. So if this is going to change, it's going to be because we change it, and it begins with realizing, as I said, it doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. The American people have a right to expect more, and it's time for the American people to remember that we, the people, are supposed to have the power in this country. And as we wake up and realize we have been played, then there's going to be a revolution of love and a revolution of justice and a revolution of democracy and a revolution of possibility.
Yes, and you can definitely go to Marianne.com for more information. And we are out of time. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much to everyone at Coast to Coast who makes this happen. George Norrie and Lisa Lyon, Tommy Danheiser, and Michael Casio here in studio, Gina Savati here in studio, and everyone, you listening, make this show happen. I'm Lisa Garr. Until next time, I invite you to stay aware.